Hi, in this tutorial we're going to make this Happy Easter graphic. We're going to be using layer styles, adjustment and fill layers, custom gradients, layer masks, and a blending mode. When we get done, you'll be able to use this graphic in your scrapbook pages or poster or any other artwork that you like. So let's get started. We're going to start with a blank file. I have a 12 by 12 inch document. I'm going to bring in a border. I'm in our Shapes panel, and I'm going to bring in this border right here. Let's just drag it in. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Something like that. Let's center that on our page. Just use that little bullet and look at the rulers up at the top. We'll put that little bullet right at about 6 inches. Okay, let's bring in our type. Click on the type tool. Let's choose our font. I'm going to use Bickham Script Bold. You can use whatever you want for this. Just going to click right here and type in. Let's make that a little bit bigger. I want it to be fairly big. I want it to fill up that space. Click the check mark and let's just slide this down a little bit into position. I like the way this kind of follows this curve of the E, and I like the way this tucks up into this little space. Let's put in our other type. Let's go ahead and get the type tool. Click right up here, and you can see it actually went in on our Easter layer. It's actually going to be changing our word Easter. We don't want that. Let's click up here, make sure we're above the word Easter. Let's change the font size. We want to go a little bit smaller. Let's just type Happy. Okay, let's select that. I'm going to make that a different font. If you're not sure what font you want to use, you can just select your type, like I did right there, and just select your font right here. Then you can use your up and down arrow keys to toggle through or to cycle through your different fonts that you have open on your machine. I'm going to use that one right there, Bodoni 72 Bold. Click the check mark, and I'm going to just slide that down into position. I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger. Get the type tool, select our type. Just bring your cursor over here over the word size. Your cursor will turn into a hand with a double-headed arrow. Just click and drag to the right, and it'll make that type a little bit bigger. We're going to go something like that. Click the check mark. Let's move it down a little bit, something like that. Okay, I'm going to put the year down here, and I'm going to use the same font as this Happy, probably the same size. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer. With that layer selected, hit Command J or Control J. That makes a copy. And I'll just slide it down to the bottom here, and let's select it. We'll just type in 2021. Click the check mark. Let's slide that something like this. Let's line these all up. Select all the type layers by shift-clicking on the top and then on the bottom. Down here in the options to the Move tool, you have some different alignment options that you can click on. Just click on this one that says Middle. That will center all three of those type layers to each other. See how it moved that word Happy over? The others all seem to be already aligned. Let's move that 2021 down just a little bit. Let's select that layer. I'm just going to use the arrow keys, the down arrow key, to just nudge that down just a little bit. Let's color the word Easter. Let's select that layer and then come up here under the adjustment layer. This is your adjustment layer icon. Let's choose a gradient adjustment layer. Click on this gradient and it'll open the gradient editor. Right now it's black to transparent. We don't want that. So let's just click on the black to white. We don't want to have any transparency here. We want these to be all solid colors. These are your color stops. This is where you can pick what color you want. So just click on this square. You can tell that's selected when that little triangle on top turns black. And now we can control or select our different colors. Just click on this swatch and it'll open the color picker. I'm just going to make a gradient with all these different colors. I'm just going to start with the top here and go right down. So let's just pick the red. Pick a red in there. Click OK. To add a color stop, you can just click down here below this color bar and it will add a stop. Click on our swatches. Let's go with this purple color. Click OK. Add another color stop. Click the swatch. Let's go with the dark blue. Click OK. Add another stop. Click the color swatch. Let's go with the light blue. Click OK. Add another stop. Click the swatch. Let's go with the green. Click OK. Add another color stop. Click the swatch. Let's go with the yellow. Click OK. Let's add another stop. Color swatch. Let's go with the orange. Click OK. And our last stop will just be this stop right here that's white. Click on that. And we'll choose this red color again. Click OK. Now we've got our gradient. You can move these stops around to control your gradients. There's also these little diamonds in between the color stops that will control where the break is in the gradients. So you can move those things around to control your gradient and make it any way that you want. I'm just going to move these around a little bit to modify my gradient and get it the way I like it. Whoops. If you click there, you'll add another stop like I did there. To get rid of the stop, just click and drag it away. What I want is that little diamond in between there. So let's click on that. Okay, let's just go something like that. I like that. Click OK. Now we want to spin that around a little bit because we want it to go from left to right. So let's take this angle and just spin that dial around till it gets to 180. You can always just type it in there too. Now you can't see exactly where it's going to go. We're going to have to scale that a little bit. But let's click OK for right now. And let's clip that to our Easter layer. When we clip it, it'll make this gradient only affect the pixels that are on this Easter layer. It'll only affect the pixels that are on the layer right beneath it. So hold down the Option or the Alt if you're on a PC and move your cursor right in between those two layers. And you'll get a square with an arrow pointing down. Just click right there. And now you can see that gradient's only affecting the word Easter. Now we need to scale that a little bit. So go ahead and double click on that adjustment layer again. Let's come to scale. Just hover over the word scale and your cursor turns into a hand with the double-headed arrow. Click. And let's drag to the left a little bit, and that will make that gradient just a little bit smaller. See how it's bringing in the red on both ends? That's what we wanted. Okay, click OK. Now I want to put a stroke around that, so let's go ahead and come up here. Let's select our layer, Easter layer, not our adjustment layer. Come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's put a stroke on it. This is a black stroke. Okay, I like that. Let's put a little bit of a bevel on it. A bevel will give it a 3D effect or an embossed effect. It'll make it kind of stand out a little bit. We'll go something like that. And let's give it a little bit of a drop shadow. Click on the drop shadow. This dial determines the angle of the light. So I usually like to come from the upper left. That will put the drop shadow down here on the lower right. Distance determines the distance from our type. So let's go something about like that. Size determines how hard or soft the shadow is. If we go all the way to the left, it's a very hard shadow. If we go more to the right, it gets very soft. We don't want it quite that soft. Let's come back just a little bit, maybe about right in there. And I want to make it a little bit darker. We can do that by opacity. Just bring the opacity up. That'll make it just a little bit darker. I like that. Let's click OK. Now we need to get our background inside here. Let's go ahead and turn the visibility of these layers off. Select the shape layer. And let's go up and get the magic wand. Make sure contiguous is checked. That means it will only select the white pixels without any breaks. So it should just select the inside of that shape without selecting any of the white pixels on the outside of that shape. Oh, looks like we need to simplify that layer. Go ahead and click OK. That just changes that image from a vector image to a raster image. As a vector image, you can scale it all you want and you won't lose any quality. Once you turn that into a raster image, then as you scale it, it'll start to lose a little bit of the quality. So try to have it the size that you want before you simplify that layer. Click inside of there. Let's see what we've got. Okay, you can see it selected all this out here. That means there must be a break somewhere in this line. I see it right there. Let's enlarge this a little bit. And yep, there it is, right there. Okay, let's deselect that selection. Command D on a Mac or Control D on a PC. Let's get our brush tool. We've got black. Let's make sure that layer is selected. Let's just paint those in and connect those lines. Like that. And we got a little spot right there. Command 0 or Control 0 to fit that in the window. This looks like just the reverse of what's up here. So let's come up here and see, and yep, there it is right there. Let's go ahead and close in that gap and fix that little spot. Command 0 to fit in the window, or Control 0 if you're on a PC. Let's get our magic wand tool again. Let's click right inside of there, and that looks good. It looks like it just selected the inside, nothing out here. So that's good. Let's go ahead and get an adjustment layer. Let's pick the pattern adjustment layer. These are your different patterns. Click on this arrow and it shows you the different patterns. And these are the different pattern sets. Right now we're in texture fill. If you click on the top one, you can use your up and down arrow key to scroll through those different patterns. You can change your pattern sets and do the same thing. And you have all these different patterns that are available in Photoshop Elements. I'm going to use the texture fill, and I'm just going to use bark. Okay, click OK. Now I want to color that, so I'm going to make another adjustment layer. I'm going to make a solid color adjustment layer right above that, and I'm going to pick a green color. Maybe something like that. Every adjustment layer automatically comes in with a layer mask. You can see it there in our gradient. You can see it here in our pattern. Now the reason we got a layer mask in our pattern is because we had that selection made. Now we need to put that same layer mask up here in our color adjustment layer. You can do that by copying this layer mask. Just hold down the Option on a Mac or the Alt on a PC and drag that layer mask up to the other layer mask and let go. Do you want to replace the layer mask? Let's replace this layer mask with that layer mask. Yes. And there you go. Now that's a solid color, so we need to use a blend mode so we can see that texture, that pattern coming through. With that solid color adjustment layer selected, come up here under the blending modes, and we can pick multiply. We'll make it a little bit darker, or we can pick overlay. That'll lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to use overlay. I like overlay. Let's turn the visibility of these other layers back on. I want to change the words happy and the 2021 to be white. So just double click on that layer and it will select the type. Let's just pick white down here in your color swatches. Same with 2021. Change that to white. Let's add a stroke around those and a drop shadow. We can actually just copy the layer style from our Easter layer. Hold down the Option or the Alt. Click on this FX that's on our Easter layer. Click on the FX and just drag it up to that layer. Now let's double click on that because I don't want the emboss effect on there. So just turn off the emboss. Click OK. Now we've got the same stroke and the same shadow as we have around Easter. Hold down the Option or the Alt and let's just copy that up to the 2021. And there we go. Okay, we've got one more thing that we need to fix. The white area between these lines and the white areas in here are all transparent. So if we pull this into a scrapbook page or a poster or something that has a background, that background is going to show through in those areas. So we need to select those areas and we'll put white in the background in those areas. The easiest way to do that is to actually select the outside area, and then we'll invert that selection. So let's select this layer. Let's get our magic wand tool, and we'll just click outside in this area. Now that should select all the outside area and leave the areas that we actually want transparent. Now we need to invert that selection so that we have what we actually want selected. So let's come up here under Select, Inverse. Now all of these areas are going to be selected, and we need to fill that with white, but we need to make a new layer. Click the new layer icon to create a new layer. Let's click and drag that underneath the other layer. When you see that line between the layers get dark and thick and black, drop it right there. Hit Shift Delete on a Mac or Shift Backspace on a PC, and we'll fill that with white. Click OK. Now you can see the white right there. Let's test it out and see if it worked. Hit Command D or Control D to deselect our selection. Let's click on the background layer and hit Shift Delete or Shift Backspace if you're on a PC to bring up the Fill Color dialog box. And we'll fill that with a color. Let's just come up to Color. That opens the color picker. We'll just choose this blue color. That's fine. Click OK. And that worked. Now the area between these lines and over here in these white areas are all white. Let's just undo that. Command Z or Control Z to bring back that white background. Let's bring in some graphics just to finish this off. Let's go to our graphics panel, and since it's Easter, let's bring in some flowers. Let's pull in some daisies. Just pull them in. Let's make that a little bit smaller by dragging on these corner squares. These are called handles. Click the check mark. Let's pull in a couple of them. You can pull them in again, or you can just duplicate that layer. Let's just pull another one in. Make it a little bit smaller as well. And we'll move it around where we want it. Click the check mark. Let's pull in one more. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I like that. Click the check mark. Let's just do the same thing down here. Just drag it in again. Size it. Click OK. Let's bring in one more. We'll just bring in two down here. We'll size this one. Click the check mark. Okay, and we're done. We learned quite a few things in this lesson. We learned about the layer styles. We created a gradient and used it on a gradient adjustment layer, and then clipped that to the type layer. We selected the inside of our shape and used a pattern adjustment layer to fill that selection. We colored that pattern using a solid color fill layer, and we used layer masks on the fill and adjustment layers. We selected the background and inverted that to make a selection so that we could keep some of the areas white. We brought in some graphics and sized them to fit. Everything we used on this graphic is available in Photoshop Elements. The last thing we need to do is save this. So let's come up here under File, Save As. Now we want to save this as a Photoshop document or a PSD. We're going to call this Easter Graphic. Find the folder we want to put it in. We want to make sure this is a Photoshop file. If it's a Photoshop file, that will save all of these layers. We want to keep all of those layers so that you can come back later if you need to or if you want to and make any kind of changes. Once it's flattened, it makes it very difficult to make any kind of changes. With these layers, you can come back in next week, next year, 10 years from now, and make changes to this document. So we've got our name. We've got our folder where it's going. It's Photoshop document. Click Save. Now we want to save this as a PNG file. That's what we're going to use to bring into our other artwork, our scrapbook pages or posters or whatever you want. A PNG file can have a transparent background, and that's what we need. First, we need to make this transparent. We can do that just by clicking the eyeball here on this background layer. You can see this checkerboard that indicates the transparent area. Let's crop this first so that it's not quite so big. Click on the crop tool. I have no restriction down here. If you have any kind of sizes down in here, it will restrict it to these sizes, and it may not be what you want. So I usually have no restrictions, and that way I can just crop it the way that I want. Let's just click and drag. And there's our crop. We're a little bit close on this edge, so let's pull that out a little bit. We can come a little closer up here if we want. You want to be fairly close, but it doesn't need to be too close. You don't want to cut anything off, but you don't need a lot of extra space because that just makes your file bigger. Click the check mark. Now we can save this as a PNG file. Come up here under File, Save As. Now we're still in our same folder. Photoshop automatically just added this _edited-1 to the end of it. And that's fine, or you can call it something else. The main important thing is to make sure that this is changed to a PNG file. Now that will flatten it, but it will also preserve the transparency. If we save this as a JPEG, it would flatten it, and it would make it a smaller file, but it would automatically put a white background in there. You can't have that. If you have that white background, you won't be able to pull that in to any other artwork that has a background. So now with PNG file selected, go ahead and hit save. Now this is your compression. PNG uses a lossless compression. That means you can compress it and it's not going to lose any information. It's not going to lose any quality. So you can compress it if you like. I usually just have no compression. Click OK, and now it's saved. And we can use that in any of our other artwork. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, and you learned anything new, don't forget to subscribe. I try and make one tutorial a week. Thank you for joining me in this one, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks. Bye.